the success is worth it. You know, a lifestyle that gives you this much freedom, even though it's scarier, you'll know if that's not for you. I think the people who are, scared and don't want to do it, there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. But if that's how you feel, you might want to listen to that signal. It's not going to be less scary once you start doing it.
I'm your host, Alan Bennett, and today's guest, we've got Turner Tomlinson. Welcome to the show, Turner.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for inviting me on here. Really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, when I saw the kind of work that you do, I was really intrigued. I was like, whoa, like, what is that? So share with the guests real quick about what kind of business are you in and who is a client of yours?
Yeah, for sure. So right now I'm CFO at the Carbon Chicken Project. What we do is we upcycle poultry litter into a soil amendment. So what that looks like is we take poultry litter and we compost it, and then we mix it with a material called biochar. We take all of that and pelletize it into little pellets, and that makes it time release its nutrients that it has in it. Also makes it easier to spread, a little easier application is how I would describe that. And so what this is an all natural recycled replacement to something like Miracle-Gro. Right now, we have a pilot plant here in Northwest Arkansas. We started in January, and we produce that now at a scale that we can approach retail stores with. So we're in several, hardwares, nurseries, retail stores around here. We're currently expanding production or trying to expand production to target the spring 2025 growing season for commercial agriculture. So these are people who would buy these pellets at a ton at a time. And so that's part of the work we're doing, right? The novelty of this startup is taking this new agricultural product and finding that commercial fit of, we know that people who want to buy it, they know why they might want to buy it, but there's a lot of other details in there of how to specifically applicate it, how it's going to, the logistics, how it's going to get from our site to their site in a way that makes sense to big agriculture. So there's a lot of fun things to figure out there. But at its core, it's waste recycling and pushing, we think a very disruptive angle in the agricultural industry because synthetic fertilizer prices are going up. Water prices are going up. This biochar soil amendment increases water retention, increases crop yield, decreases the amount of fertilizer you need. So there's a lot of bonuses here. The biggest one probably being that since there's this biochar material is pure carbon, it enhances the soil, but it also does permanent carbon capture relative to humans. This carbon is not going to break down for a few thousand years. So it's one of the only really reliable long-term carbon capture technologies we have as well. So the idea for the company had been gestating for years and years. Our CEO, Jody Harden, has been working in biochar for more than a decade on the R&D to develop this pelletized product. So that's where we're at. That's where what we do. It's a little complicated, right? A little heavy. It's like there's almost too many good things in different directions. Kind of, get a little suspicious. But we're right there where the technological understanding and the hardware, the equipment, all the pots and pans to do it. All these things exist, and we're seeing a big tipping point in the agriculture industry around biochar, around waste, manure, chicken litter, upgrading. It's just a couple of years ago, the USDA actually published a study that they said we're pretty close to the point where the chicken litter is going to be worth as much as the protein, as much as the chicken meat at the end of the day. So wow, that's a very interesting dynamic. And then just as far as the overall sort of industry landscape, that's why we're doing this project here where I'm from and located in Northwest Arkansas. It is essentially the world capital for chicken litter production. Tyson's headquarters is here. That's what we do.
All right. I have got to ask, how in the world? Yeah. So that's way cool. I have my undergraduate, my degree is in microbiology. So you're speaking.
Oh, really?
You're teasing me a little bit here, but how did this even start? I mean, what's the roots behind, hey guys, you know what we ought to do? Where did that come from?
Well, chicken litter as a known nutrient source has not been a secret. Farmers for decades and decades. I'm not from the agriculture industry specifically. A lot of my colleagues are here, so I lean on them for kind of industry knowledge. But my understanding is that people have been spreading chicken litter raw on their fields for
Hmm.
as long as there's been chicken litter laying around without a home. It does add nutrients. It also adds pollution. So
Odor.
there's
Don't forget odor.
Odor is a big issue here. Yeah, big issue. There's a lawsuit working its way through the courts right now. The state of Oklahoma has sued the chicken producers in Northwest Arkansas over the ongoing pollution of the Illinois River watershed, which a lot of that catch basin is here in Northwest Arkansas, specifically Benton and Washington counties, is where the chicken litter production is we're focusing on. That all trickles down and ends up in Oklahoma. It ends up in southern Arkansas on the watershed. So that's a big part of it. Is everyone has known we sure would like a better thing to do with the poultry litter, all things equal. You shift the discussion a little bit to the technology around biochar, which is this pure carbon material. Where did that come from? Luckily, right, we didn't invent this. This is it turns out, 1,000-year-old technique for enhancing soil. So this began with an anthropologic problem. Within that domain, they were trying to understand how did such large populations, how are they able to sustain themselves in the Amazon River basin? There's some white papers in this direction that use the term Terra Preta, T-R-A-P-R-E-T-A. It's Latin for dark earth. And so before we had a name for biochar, that's what they were calling it when they did these core samples of the soil in the Amazon and found that it was like clay, brown, not healthy soil. And then when they hit the layer where they were doing farming, very rich, dark, black soil. That was the question they were trying to figure out for a while was one, how do they enhance the soil to do this, to support their population? It turns out it was essentially ritual burning of fields. The technique for creating biochar, we have large machinery that does it now. We call those pyrolysis units. But they're just expediting something that it turns out humans have done for thousands of years with this burning of the fields. It creates a biochar layer that enhances the soil. And if you do it over time, it regenerates that soil and puts it in a position to increase your crop yield, to grow bigger, stronger, healthier plants, year after year. So that's some of the roots. Kind of zooming in toward our company. Our CEO, Jody Harden, is a fifth generation farmer here in Arkansas. His family has a big, I forget how many acres, a big farm outside Little Rock. And he's been in this.
Grady, isn't it? And that is
Grady, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he still wear a straw hat?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all the time.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He really works the straw hat. Yeah. So he had been working in and with biochar for more than a decade. Trying to find where is the market fit, where is, kind of following that adoption curve up as it was kind of climbing. And then we are seeing kind of a tipping point in the adoption curve here because it's sort of it's kind of the market is realizing basically that we can take all this waste, not just chicken litter, but very, very, very different sources of waste that are very flexible in the pyrolysis process to make this biochar material that it enhances soil. And that's what we're focusing on now. But there are tons of applications just up and down the whole stack of technology for biochar. And when you couple that, its sort of abilities and features with the fact that it also is sequestering carbon, then very quickly you come to this understanding that it's not really something we're going to have a choice about, I think, on the macro scale. As we kind of move forward on this climate change problem, I mean, what you're really talking about is the bulk of society's productive capacity shifting towards fighting the climate problem for probably 50 years. Biochar is one of the few free lunches we have on that journey. The way you make it with a pyrolysis unit, it reduces weight, generates energy, and outputs biochar. So there's no question we're just going to have to stamp this all over everywhere.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've created a product that is, that is green, so to speak, right? It's green, it's sustainable, it impacts positively the environment and the what the farmers are trying to grow, right? So we've got that. So now let's take a step back. How did you start that? How did the team come together? Yeah, I know you're, sitting around a campfire going, "Hey guys, this is what we ought to do." How do you build that? How do you go from some guys tossing around an idea to actually doing something? How that talk through that journey?
Yeah, definitely. That tossing the idea around phase, that's you might call it like a cyclical, you do that a lot and just churn a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. And then it's hard to kind of say exactly how but at some point it sort of emerges where all of you in the room, whatever your group is, and us, it was the three kind of startup founders who were kind of nodding and thinking, okay, if we could do it, we think at this point we really understand all of the capital, all the operating expenses, and the path to the market. I think if you're checking the box on those three things with a lot of confidence, and it helps so much if you have a partner, so that you both of you having confidence can be a little validating. If you have three, that's even better. And then you start talking about kind of partner chemistry. You kind of want an optimist and a pessimist in there, so that you can kind of accurately bounce around as you do that kind of cyclical thing. And then I think ultimately getting outside funding. I think that's really interesting to go, even if it's just a seed round. Because if it's you and a few people, you're already convinced. You already want to believe it's going to be real. So it's really dangerous when you're in that position and you're the one who says, and I'll liquidate my retirement to fund it,
Yes.
So going to find a seed funder to get started, I think is really critical, because hopefully you're already talking to smart people, right? But this may be the first other person who, what you're really asking is like, do you think our idea and plan is so good you'll bet literal money on us? And getting someone to cross that line, one, is going to force you to actually understand your situation much, much better, because they will be looking to knock it down, not looking because they want to believe in it. And then if you can go through that process, is extremely validating, right? You have an outside person who wants to bet actual money on you. I mean, that is something like after you, with you and your colleagues or whoever, you do that cyclical ideas process to come out and find out, wow, someone else agrees. It kind of helps you feel like you're not all, just crazy, because that's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a Shark Tank type of situation.
Yeah. So I think maybe to actually circle back to answer your question, I'm the CFO here. I'm an chemical engineer by trade. I have a very analytical mindset. So for me, it's easy for me to tell when I'm ready, when I think it's really like ready at a spreadsheet level. For me, that how sort of reality maps onto my brain at this point. I need that visual sort of that's like a neutral third party to me. Math can't lie, right? So if you can really make the math look good, this is a very, very compelling signal for you to kind of keep moving forward, talk to smarter people, stuff like that.
Yeah. So when you built your team, so right now you've identified yourself as a facts and figures person. Give me the data and I'll figure it out if it's good, right? So you've got that. So talk about the other team members. What strengths are they bringing to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with me being an engineer, having been I was in the oil industry for 5 years in Mississippi. I was a process engineer at a crude oil refinery. After that, I was in water management at a company called Phygenics, and we made water management programs typically for healthcare facilities with large plumbing systems. So all that to say, I have a decent feel for how to execute things generally. But my colleagues, Jody, who I mentioned is a fifth generation farmer, another of the three co-founders, his name is Richard Ems. He's his own business owner. He has food recycling solutions here in Northwest Arkansas. So they do just human bio waste upcycling, food waste, like collected from restaurants, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Their expertise that is much, much closer to the domain, the actual agriculture and farming, the actual recycling and collection and that type of thing. That was, I think, kind of how we seasoned ourselves. Is from my sort of collection of background, kind of know sort of how to maybe chart and understand a business. to some degree. So when we all started talking together, and I learned more about their idea and really thought it was compelling. And I kept asking more questions, and they seemed to have really good answers for them. It was just really clear they had thought about this for a while. And then, we kind of figured out if we could work together, kind of warm up to each other. And then once it was clear we wanted to work together, that was how I kind of understood my fit very clearly. As I asked those questions, and they seemed to know all of them. But then when I said, "Do we have, where's the business model?" No one has any spreadsheets. No one has anything. So to me, that was how I very quickly identified, like, oh, okay, well, all of us could wear a lot of different hats here, but for this, in the context of the business right now, you need a CFO. You need someone to help you raise funds, get started, find the seed funding. After that, manage the business, right? Report to the investor, that type of thing. Get another round of funding started. So, I think that I didn't go looking for a CFO spot at a firm. And maybe that's an important detail. As I went looking for a place I could have impact, with an impressive team, and then kind of figure out what they needed. And everyone else on the team is kind of in that mode too. I mentioned the 3 founders, and I won't bore you with the names of all the people. Anyone listening, you can go to our website, carbonchicken.com, and kind of see more of the team members. But I mentioned Jody had been working this for more than a decade, R&D. We got our seed funding January 2024. Before that point, though, there's more than 5 or 6 other people who've been volunteering for years as part of the project. This kind of a demonstration of its bench. That was one of the things that compelled me the most. Is when I came in, is found out the CEO has all these very high quality individuals volunteering for a long time. I mean, that demonstrates a lot of passion for the project. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. No, that was it. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So as the business grows, I guess you've added other team members to besides yourselves. How's that process work for you when you add team members, or in the selection of the additional team members outside of the core? How'd that work?
Well, right now we really haven't added that many outside the core. It's still, we did only get seed funding in January, and so people are involved. We have a plan to scale. We've started to win several high-profile grants, which is very exciting. But actually, later today, I have interviews with some interns at the local university here. And so, I've done, a lot of hiring and firing at other firms, and so just in general, I can answer that is it starts with a role. You've got to be able to define a role for someone first, and then talk about resources, and then there has to be a culture fit. So that's kind of the path I have in mind is, can they do the role? And then is it really going to be a culture fit? And that's really, really hard with a startup, because if you're in a big established firm, in a larger firm, if the culture is strong, new people adopt the culture. And if it's not strong, then new people change the culture.
Yeah.
We're still a startup, so to say we have any specific culture would be, it's kind of early days.
But you have an an opportunity to build the culture. That's what I'm. Yeah. You got the opportunity to build the culture that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the questions you're going to ask, what is it as you're building that? What is it you're looking to hear when you build that team? Because that's a critical thing. Especially in a small firm, one person gets out of whack, and all of a sudden, you've got some. So talk about that. How do you plan on doing that?
Well, I definitely go into it with a series of questions about the role specifically. But then I think maybe that's, everybody knows you have to ask and figure out if they can actually do the skill for the role. I think the thing that's less obvious is understanding like the person on the other side of a hiring deal is selling their labor. So sort of what's in it for them to sell their labor. And to understand that, I think you really have to know the context your business is in. So for us, I know the industry, I know what we're trying to make, I know what our goals are. But the context is really specific here. We're a startup. It's going to be a very informal feel right now. The thing you said earlier, you need accountability. You need to kind of trust someone will do something when you're not in the room with them, and kind of do it in maybe the same way you would. Yeah. So I'll make that clear, in the interviews, is the context of the business is that we are in this startup mode. And so it will be a very fuzzy edged role. And so I'll ask people, do you want someone to be specifically charting your path, or do you want room to kind of, co-create? Because not everybody likes the expectation of having to do novel things.
Mhm.
So I think trying to figure that out. And of course, the other layer of the interview is they're almost certainly going to tell you what you want to hear. So that's part of it too. But
Yeah. It's, as far as, and this is just you personally right here. I want to ask this question. Let's talk about mentors that you've had in the past or current mentors that you've had. I know in my journey of entrepreneurship, it's some people knew they were my mentors and some had to figure it out. I didn't say, hey, would you be my mentor? It wasn't that way. But everybody had a place. And as I went along my journey, some people became more important, less important, but I kind of hung on to those relationships. Did you, or have you had, or do you have mentors that have kind of helped guide you along the way on your journey?
Yeah, definitely. I can think of several here that are sort of whenever I start to get spooked or panicked a little bit, this is kind of the first name you think of. Like, I call them, they can help me out with this. That's that's your mentor.
Yeah.
And so I've been lucky to have a couple as a boss at a previous firm. It was a great mentor throughout that whole process, and some other people I can work with. And in Northwest Arkansas here, the startup jump group and the startup community is very available. So there's a lot of people you can call, and we'll take that call. And that's incredible. You got to lean on those resources. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about now that you're out of the gate, right? So the gate's open and we're starting to move a little bit. When you start looking at how to plan, how to strategize, what kind of conversations do you have that help you frame up the path that you need to take? How do you do that?
I think a lot of kind of reassessing with the team, what does it seem like our priority should be? It just since you just mentioned mentors, that was a piece of advice one of my mentors gave me early on in this process is, you're not a big, strong, healthy tree yet. You're a little sapling. But the advantage of being a little sapling is you're very flexible. So you can really, you can do a lot of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of, so I think an awareness that whatever we started the startup to do 1 year from now will almost certainly not be what we're doing if we're listening and following the market. So I think, having a shared kind of operating system that expects that amount of flexibility between all of us kind of leaves the door open for, should we do this? No, it's too far away from our goal. But look at the market potential. Okay, maybe this should be our goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So as you said that, I had a flashback about 20 years ago. I started a business up from scratch, and it was, I knew what I wanted and I knew the product I wanted to put out there, and I had a team to help me do it. And then it's like, what do we do now? Like, okay.
Yeah.
And there was a moment where I'm out there and I'm doing it, but it took me, I want to say it was somewhere around year 4 or year 5 that I actually became self-confident that I think I've actually made it, right? I've actually gotten over this milestone. So talk about a milestone that you've had in this journey that you with this company. Talk about a milestone and how you approached it, how you worked through maybe some obstacles that were in there in order to get on the other side of that milestone. Share that story.
Yeah. I mean, since it's so early, I can maybe just talk on some milestones in progress, maybe some MIPS. It's kind of like KPIs, maybe.
Yeah.
We with our retail product, the goal is to go into commercial agriculture and capture that scale. With our retail product, we sell a 4-pound bag of this soil amendment. We sell it in retail stores. We sell it at farmers markets. So I would say a big milestone was getting that first product created and then getting to market and then getting that really strong feedback, specifically at farmers markets where people would come to the table to spend $4 on some carrots that we had grown. And then while they're at the table, they say, what's this other thing you've got? And by the end of the pitch, they're now willing to spend $20 on a bag of the soil amendment. The number of times we would see that cold conversion after people hear the story, that was a huge milestone just to hit the market and see, wow, people seem to care about this. We still have, demand creation issues because you can't have a one-on-one conversation with everybody you hope buys it. So that's maybe like another milestone we're looking to solve, is trying to get in at sort of a bigger scale, and maybe go through a distributor to get into a lot of these stores that we've gone to one-on-one and demonstrated some success with. So that's maybe one milestone, entering the market, and then the next milestone is working towards a distributorship. As far as what that looks like is, we meet, we talk to the team, got a weekly sales meeting, things like that, and just make sure we keep the focus on, the distributor deal. Now that's our marketing strategy right now. And 2 weeks from now, maybe we'll probably redefine the marketing strategy. But
Yeah, to kind of stay on this pattern of milestones and getting there. I remember in my early days, I had a meat market. That's where I started out. It ended up being evolving into a catering business. But when I had the meat market, that was where everything started. And for me, it was about building trust. And trust was I had to provide a consistent product, right? It had to perform, whether it was steak or the seafood or the chicken, it had to be good quality every time that somebody came in. And then I had to show competence that I knew how to cut meat, or my team knew how to cut meat. So we had several categories under trust, consistency, competency, compassion, right? You had to understand they are after, my customers are after quality stuff. So when you're working through your process on trying to build trust, it's the people that are buying this. When are they coming back? Are you hearing from them afterwards? What is it that they're saying when you get feedback from them?
Oh yeah, I mean, the direct feedback on the quality of the product. I mean, we're just kind of swimming in it. People send us pictures, they share us. They say tallest tomato plants they've ever grown, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The other maybe like harder part of choosing sort of this strategy in this industry is fundamentally the industry is cyclical, or maybe not cyclical, like seasonal, right? Everyone's growing everything in spring, so our product can benefit the plant throughout the growing season. But again, I can explain to you in a one-on-one conversation why it's still good to use some in winter. But probably most people at retail are not going to be having that conversation. They're just not going to think about their plants in the winter, right? They're just going to be, oh, it's winter. Yeah, we're sort of building that list of all our people to go back to, so that we can send them that recurring, sort of reminder next year. It's time to get ready. Send them stuff for the fall planting season. But again, I mean, it's demand creation, right? I mean, even I think I saw a couple of weeks back that Nike, they had spent 8% of top line revenue on demand creation, brand partnerships and things like that in 2023. And everybody knows about Nike, right? You already know about Nike. So just think about the demand creation problem for a new brand, and so we have the seed funding for the pilot plant. We have no marketing budget. So that we're doing, very bootstrapped startup marketing right now. Yeah, maybe that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love the bootstrap. That's exactly what it is. It's like,
yeah, definitely.
This is what we've got. So let's look at if you could go back. All right, so now the audience that we're talking to right now are people that are either have been in your shoes, or they're in the process of opening up a business. We have a lot of followers that do that. So if you could say something to, let's say this is an aspiring entrepreneur, somebody that's getting into something technical like what you've gotten into. It's a very specific industry that you've got. If you could tell that person one piece of advice in the process of building their business to get it started, what would be one or two things that you might say to them to help give them that support, that push to get it done?
And push to get it done. I think it's as far as like something to keep you motivated and give you that support. Just know that the success is worth it. A lifestyle that gives you this much freedom, even though it's scarier. You'll know if that's not for you. I think the people who are scared and don't want to do it, there's nothing wrong with feeling that way. But if that's how you feel, you might want to listen to that signal. It's not going to be less scary once you start doing it. So that's one thing, is I think know really kind of what you're getting into. Is you're sort of working up against the market. That said, if you know you want to do it, the other piece of advice I would say is almost certainly plenty of people who are not as smart or able as you to do this are having success with it because they're willing to believe on themselves more.
Mm.
That's a really important detail, is that, I write fiction on the side too. And that's one thing that over time I'll read a series of very, very good fiction books and feel kind of downtrodden, like, oh, I could never read something that's good. And then every once in a while I'll pick up a New York Times bestseller and it's garbage. And that is like the biggest, like, oh my gosh, there's still space. I think I could do maybe better than this. So yeah, when you feel downtrodden, look at another business that's similar to what you're trying to do that you don't think is doing very good, and that will give you a little kind of boost of confidence, just because you're seeing,
Yeah.
oh, I could do this a little better, I could do this a little better.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good advice. Is just remember your willingness to bet on yourself is one of the only variables you can actually control here, and it's a tremendously important one. So
Oh yeah, mindset is everything.
mm, yeah,
That's
yeah, it
the world
really
that I
is.
live in, and it's all
Mm-hmm.
about perseverance. There's just pushing
Yeah.
through and getting it done. Yes,
Yeah,
I've
the perseverance, sorry, not to cut you off, but the
no,
perseverance related to mindset is really, really important there. I think some people, maybe it's tempting to kind of push yourself and think, if I can summon enough willpower now to set this
mhm.
goal for myself and change my mentality today, then I'll sort of be across the threshold and things will just feel different. But the mindset game specifically is, in my experience, much, much, much more like going to the gym and working out,
Mhm.
where you're never ever really done. You're always just, this is a lifestyle of like choosing the struggle kind of day in, day out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. So the people
Mm-hmm.
that are listening, if they want to find out more about you or your company and what things are
Mm-hmm.
going on, how do they find you?
Yeah, you can go to carbonchicken.com. If you're interested in me specifically, you can find me on LinkedIn, reach out there and send me a note or something. But
Okay.
yeah, check us out.
All right. Well, great. I
Mm,
appreciate you being on the show and sharing
yeah, for
your
sure.
experience. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.